Invincible is actually an incredible comic that I've had the pleasure of speed reading recently. While I had read the early arcs of the series a number of times, I'm glad I finally dedicated myself to reading the whole thing. Normally, I would start a series like this with the actual main character of the show, Mark Grayson, aka Invincible, and that video is absolutely coming next. But I wanted to start off on a different note and talk about a character in the show and in the comics that is the most interesting to me. Now, maybe it's because I've always liked villains more than heroes, or maybe it's because I'm actually training to take over the world myself. But since starting the series, I've gravitated toward Omni-Man, and he's become one of my favorite characters in comics ever. Today's video is on the comic origins and a brief history of the most powerful hero, then villain, then hero again. Nolan Grayson, the Omni-Man. Omni-Man's first appearance was in, you guessed it, issue number 1 of Invincible. Nolan Grayson is the husband to Deborah Grayson and father to Mark Grayson, who would go on to become Invincible. Omni-Man is widely recognized as Earth's most powerful superhero, and sometimes he's a member of the Guardians of the Globe, a team that closely resembles the Justice League. And I'm not going to discuss the history of those members, ever. And you'll learn why in a few seconds. Nolan Grayson is, first and foremost, an alien, a member of the Viltrumite race, who came from the planet Viltrum. As Nolan's son Mark approaches his 18th birthday, Nolan plans to start training him. Mark is half Viltrumite, half Earthling. Nolan has told Mark his entire life about the Viltrumite people. They are a benevolent race of beings who evolved through a form of Darwinism, i.e., only the strong survive. After years of breeding the strongest of their people, they go out into the stars and begin to defend the universe for other fledgling planets. Nolan was stationed on Earth, where he met Mark's mother and became Earth's greatest champion. We also learned that Viltrumites live for thousands of years, and their speed and strength are some of, if not the, highest known in the universe. Additionally, they get more powerful as they age. So it's fairly rare for a young Viltrumite to be stronger than a fully matured or even elderly one. When Mark turns 18, his powers kick in, and he starts to fight crime under the name Invincible, a name that's truly put to the test many times throughout the series. One of their earliest adventures is repelling a Thraxan invasion, where Nolan ends up stranded in another dimension for months. The Thraxans become a major recurring species throughout the series, and I'll discuss them in far greater detail when I cover Robot. For those of you who have seen the first episode, you already know the biggest twist of the early part of the series. Nolan is not exactly who he says he is. One day, the entire Guardians of the Globe team is summoned to their base, where they are systematically dismantled by Nolan. He kills all of them easily. He slaughters the entire team and leaves the planet to believe they were attacked by some unknown assailant. The remaining superheroes of Earth are shocked to learn of their passing, including Mark, who looked up to the team and aspired to one day be a member. Eventually, when the surviving member of the Guardians, Immortal, comes back to life, Nolan realizes he must tell Mark the truth. Nolan reveals to Mark that he killed the Guardians and explains the truth about the Viltrumite Empire. They are not the benevolent protectors Nolan once described. In reality, the Viltrumites are conquerors. After centuries of infighting, selective breeding, and eugenics, they began conquering worlds. They only need one Viltrumite per planet. The deal? Submit and give up natural resources, and in return, be protected. Refuse? Be eradicated. Nolan had been stationed on Earth under this mission. Now that Mark's powers had kicked in, he believed it was time for him to return to that purpose. Mark is horrified. He refuses to join his father, and the two fight. The battle is absolutely brutal. Nolan completely overpowers Mark, nearly beating him to death. But instead of killing him, Nolan flies off into space, leaving Earth behind. Nolan does not return to the Viltrumite Empire. Instead, he goes to a planet called Thraxa, populated by insectoid beings. Due to their short lifespans, only about 9 months, they elect the oldest person as leader. Nolan, being thousands of years old, is instantly elected. He marries a local woman named Andressa and has a child with her. Eventually, he sends for Mark under false pretenses. The two reconcile somewhat. Nolan admits he has changed and no longer wishes to be a conqueror. But he knows the Viltrumites are coming. When they arrive, Mark tries to save Nolan's new family, but is severely outmatched. Nolan and Mark fight the three Viltrumites, and though Nolan does significant damage, he is ultimately defeated and taken prisoner. His spine is shattered. Before being separated, Nolan urges Mark to read his books. He's hidden clues within them for how to fight the Viltrumites. While Nolan is imprisoned, he meets Alan the Alien, an old adversary turned ally. Alan, now stronger than ever, allows himself to be captured just to find Nolan. They form a strong friendship. Eventually, Alan helps Nolan escape, and they go to the Coalition of Planets. Nolan reveals a major truth. The Viltrumites are nearly extinct. Only around 50 purebloods remain, wiped out by a virus called the Scourge virus. Nolan's original mission was to find ways to interbreed with other species and repopulate the Viltrumites. Together with the Coalition, Nolan begins planning a war against the Viltrumite Empire. Nolan returns to Mark and Oliver, his son from Thraxa, who ages rapidly. They're ambushed by Viltrumites, including the fearsome Conquest. After a brutal battle, the heroes are victorious, but their ship is destroyed, and Mark is severely injured. They hide on a remote planet until Mark heals. Then they rejoin the war effort. A final assault is launched on Viltrum. The Viltrum homeworld is destroyed, but at a cost. Nolan is disemboweled. The leader of the Viltrumites, Thragg, who resembles Freddie Mercury, goes into a rage. Still, he retreats with the remaining Viltrumites. Nolan and Mark recover and return to Earth, expecting destruction, but instead find Thragg already there. He proposes a truce. Let the Viltrumites live and breed among humans, or continue the war and doom the Earth. Mark reluctantly agrees. Nolan reconciles with Deborah, and they briefly live on the Coalition homeworld. Long after Nolan's rise as Emperor and the war with Thragg, a new threat emerges. But this time, it doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within the Coalition of Planets. Alan the Alien, now hardened by war and leadership, confesses a devastating secret to Nolan. He has developed a new virus, one even deadlier than the original Scourge virus, designed specifically to target Viltrumites. Alan's plan? To release it on Earth, wiping out the remaining Viltrumites who had integrated into society. Some of whom had chosen peace, some even started families. Nolan is horrified. This was genocide. It would kill not just soldiers, but children, families. His people, the very people he had tried to save, to redeem. While Nolan and the Coalition tried to stabilize the universe, Thragg had escaped. He went into hiding and began breeding a new generation of Viltrumite hybrids using the insectoid species known as the Ragnars. These hybrids were powerful, loyal, and terrifying. Thragg himself also became stronger, training in solitude, refining his already unmatched power. When Thragg finally returned, it sparked the most brutal and devastating war in the series. Omni-Man and his allies were outnumbered and outmatched. The conflict spanned multiple planets and resulted in mass destruction. Eventually, it all led to the final brutal battle. Omni-Man versus Thragg. The fight was monstrous. Nolan, despite his strength, was older and wounded from past battles. Thragg, in his prime and fueled by rage, was overwhelming. The battle took them to Thraxa, the home of Nolan's second family. There, they fought to the death. Nolan gave everything he had, for his sons, for Earth, for redemption. But in the end, Thragg kills him. Nolan dies a warrior's death, protecting what he had come to truly love, his family and the innocent. Omni-Man's death was not in vain. His sacrifice helped unite the fractured Viltrumites under a new purpose, not conquest, but coexistence. His son Mark, Invincible, ultimately defeats Thragg, and with Nolan's guidance and example, reshapes the future of their people. Nolan Grayson, once sent to conquer Earth, died defending it. He was not a perfect man. He committed atrocities, but he changed. He chose love over duty, family over empire. And that's why Omni-Man's story is one of the greatest arcs in comic history.